My name is Daniel Mercer, and what I'm about to share with you is something I never imagined I'd experience. It happened on March 14, 2016, a day that started like any other but ended with my entire world turned upside down. I had just finished a long shift at the mechanic shop where I worked and decided to stop by my church on the way home. I often found comfort sitting alone in the quiet sanctuary, reflecting and praying before heading back to my wife, Rachel, and our 2 kids, Caleb and Hannah. But that evening, as I knelt in prayer, something happened that I can barely put into words. One moment I was whispering a quiet prayer for guidance, and the next, everything around me faded to black. I later learned that I had collapsed and my heart had stopped for nearly 20 minutes. But during that time, I wasn't just unconscious. I was somewhere else. I found myself standing in a place filled with warmth and light, a presence so powerful yet peaceful surrounding me. Then I saw him, Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, yet I felt no fear. His eyes held a love so deep it pierced my soul, and when he spoke my name, I knew I was known in a way I had never experienced before. He told me he had something to show me, something I had to warn others about. Suddenly, the peaceful light shifted, and I found myself standing in a world that looked familiar yet different. Colder, darker, and unsettling. Jesus began to show me scenes of what was to come, and what I witnessed shook me to my core. I saw leaders rising to power, men and women who seemed kind, wise, and full of good intentions. They spoke with passion, promising peace, security, and unity. Their words brought comfort to millions, and people clung to their promises like a lifeline. But Jesus warned me that these leaders were not who they appeared to be. Beneath their polished smiles and comforting words was a hidden darkness, an agenda designed to lead people away from God without them even realizing it. As Jesus continued to show me this vision, I realized that this deception was far more powerful than I could have imagined. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, subtle, and carefully woven into everyday life. People believed they were doing what was right, convinced they were moving toward a better world. I saw churches where once bold pastors had grown fearful, watering down their sermons to avoid offending anyone. They spoke only of love and acceptance but avoided the hard truths, the kind that challenge us to stand firm in our faith. These pastors weren't evil people. Many of them thought they were helping. But out of fear of losing their congregations or facing criticism, they chose to soften the message of God's word. The deception stretched even further than that. I saw new technology being introduced, devices and systems that seemed miraculous. They promised to make life easier, safer, and more convenient, but there was a hidden cost. Those who accepted these tools unknowingly surrendered their freedom to a global system that demanded absolute control. At first, it seemed harmless. People were told it was for their protection, a way to simplify access to food, healthcare, and even communication. But I could see what others couldn't. This system was designed to strip away people's reliance on God, replacing it with reliance on a false sense of security. What terrified me most was how easily people accepted it, even some who had once been strong in their faith. They justified their choices by saying, "It's just easier this way," or "It's not really a big deal." But I knew what I was seeing. This system wasn't just about convenience. It was a trap. I watched as entire families were divided by this deception. Some resisted, holding firm to their faith and refusing to submit to the new order. But they were mocked, treated as outcasts, and labeled as threats to society. The media painted them as dangerous extremists, twisting their faith into something hateful and irrational. Yet despite the rejection, those who refused to compromise held on to something powerful: peace. There was a strength within them that couldn't be explained by anything the world had to offer. Jesus turned to me and said, "The truth will not be popular, but it will set them free. Tell them they must cling to it. even when the world turns against them. Jesus then showed me something even more powerful, the strength that would sustain those who refused to give in. I saw small groups of believers gathering in secret, meeting in homes, barns, and even hidden spaces deep in the woods. These weren't grand churches with choirs and stages. They were simple, humble gatherings where people came together to pray, worship, and encourage one another. I could feel the warmth in those rooms, a sense of peace and unity that no hardship could break. They weren't just surviving. They were thriving spiritually because their faith in God had become their foundation. In one vision, I saw a family huddled in a dimly lit room. They had little more than a few pieces of bread and some water, but they prayed over it with such unwavering trust. As they bowed their heads, I watched in amazement as the food seemed to multiply right before my eyes. Bread filled the table, and there was more than enough for everyone. The family wept in gratitude, knowing this wasn't luck, it was God's provision. Jesus explained that miracles like this would become common for those who placed their full trust in Him. They will lack nothing, He told me, if they seek me first. I was also shown a group of believers who had spent days searching for water with no success. Exhausted and discouraged, they finally knelt together in prayer. As they cried out to God, a spring of clear, fresh water suddenly bubbled up from the dry ground beneath them. The joy on their faces was unforgettable, not just because their thirst was quenched, but because they knew God had heard them. Jesus told me that these miracles wouldn't be for personal gain or comfort, but to strengthen the faith of those who witnessed them. Tell them, He said, that faith will be their currency. Those who trust me will have what they need, even when the world says otherwise. As the visions continued, Jesus showed me that the miracles weren't just limited to food and water. I saw people being healed from illnesses that should have claimed their lives. In one vision, I witnessed a woman who had been bedridden for years, her body frail and weak. Her family knelt beside her, their hands clasped tightly in prayer. Their voices trembled with desperation, yet they prayed with unwavering belief. Suddenly, the woman opened her eyes, sat up, and stood on her feet as strength returned to her body. The tears, the cries of joy, it was overwhelming. Jesus explained that these miracles would not come from human effort or medical advancements, but by the power of prayer and complete reliance on Him. But just as He showed me these powerful moments of deliverance, Jesus also warned me about those who would misuse this divine power. There were some who demanded miracles out of pride or selfishness, expecting God to prove Himself without a true relationship with Him. Their prayers were hollow, driven by arrogance rather than faith. I saw these people pleading for signs, yet their cries went unanswered because their hearts were not aligned with God's will. Jesus told me, "These miracles are not for those who test me. They are for those who trust me." Then came one of the most chilling moments of my vision. I saw a group of believers who had been discovered by those enforcing the new system. These faithful men and women were cornered with no way out. Yet instead of panicking, they knelt together and began to pray. As their voices rose, a brilliant shield of light appeared around them, so bright that their enemies couldn't even see them. Confused and frightened, the pursuers stumbled away, unable to touch those inside the light. Jesus turned to me and said, "My protection is greater than any power of darkness. Tell my people not to fear." Jesus then showed me something that deeply shook me. A world consumed by fear. I saw families torn apart, friendships broken, and people turning on one another. Those who accepted the mark felt secure for a time, believing they had made the right choice. They had access to food, shelter, and jobs, but their hearts were empty. There was no peace in their lives, only a constant sense of anxiety, as if something dark lingered just beyond their sight. They trusted in the system that promised comfort, yet deep inside, They knew they had traded something far more precious. Meanwhile, those who refused the mark faced constant struggles. They were denied basic necessities, rejected by society, and treated like criminals. I saw parents desperately trying to protect their children, gathering whatever scraps of food they could find. Yet despite the hardship, these people possessed something the others had lost: peace. Their faces, though weary, shone with a quiet strength. They trusted in God's provision, and somehow He never failed them. I watched as families gathered in prayer, asking for help when they had nothing left. And time again, I witnessed God providing in ways that defied all logic, food appearing from unexpected places, illnesses healed, and dangers miraculously avoided. Jesus reminded me that these miracles were not meant to create comfort, but to strengthen His people's faith and remind them that He was still with them. "Tell them," He said, "that I have not abandoned them. Even when the world seems darkest, my light will remain with those who seek me." His words filled me with hope, yet I knew the path ahead would be difficult. As Jesus continued to show me these visions, He revealed just how powerful fear would become, and how the enemy would use it to manipulate people. I saw crowds of terrified individuals lining up to receive the mark, not because they believed in it, but because they were afraid. Fear of losing their homes, fear of hunger, fear of being separated from their families. These anxieties drove people to surrender without question. I watched mothers weeping as they accepted the mark just to feed their children. I saw fathers justifying their decision, convincing themselves that it was harmless or that God would understand. But what they didn't realize was that this mark wasn't just a symbol. It was a spiritual agreement, a final decision to place their trust in the world system instead of in God. Yet what struck me most was the strength of those who resisted. They had nothing by the world's standards: no money, no security, no place to call home. But they had an unwavering faith that couldn't be shaken. I saw believers hiding in the wilderness, praying together in quiet whispers. Despite their circumstances, they weren't afraid. Their strength didn't come from what they could see, but from the absolute certainty that God would provide. Jesus told me, "Fear is the enemy's greatest weapon, but my perfect love casts out all fear. Tell them to trust in me, and I will carry them through." In one final vision, Jesus showed me a small group of believers kneeling in prayer, their hands clasped tightly as they interceded for someone lost in darkness. This person had once been strong in their faith but had drifted away, deceived by the comforts and security promised by the world. As the group prayed, I saw chains, dark and heavy, break apart from the person's body. Their eyes opened as if they were seeing the truth for the first time, and they fell to their knees, weeping with gratitude. Jesus told me, "Prayer is not just words, it is a weapon. My people must learn to pray with authority and faith. Through prayer, strongholds will be broken, hearts will be softened, and my truth will be revealed." Before He sent me back, Jesus gave me one final message, a warning and a promise. He said, "The time is near, but my people will not be forsaken. Those who remain faithful, those who trust in me above all else, will be protected and provided for. Tell them to hold fast, for I am with them, even until the very end." When I woke up in the hospital, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to share what I had seen, no matter the cost. I know some people may doubt my experience, and others may say I imagined it all. But I can't deny what I witnessed. Jesus is real, and His love is greater than any fear or hardship we may face. If you're watching this and you feel lost, afraid, or uncertain about the future, I urge you, turn to Him now. Trust in Him no matter what the world says. He is our provider, our protector, and our peace. If this message spoke to you, please share it with others. Someone you know may need to hear this truth today. And if you'd like to hear more about my experience or stories of God's miraculous provision, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay strong in your faith, because no matter what's coming, you are never alone. God bless you all.